Good morning. How are we doing today? Great. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so just a couple of quick things. I have copies of the book here for free. We're working on version 1.2. The version on Amazon right now is 1.1, and so I have some of them. I wanted to share them with you today. So if you would like one, please take one. Sit them around your office, share them with friends, that kind of thing. Another thing is that basically, we all have ideas about love, and this book the book contains my opinions, but it's kind of crowdsourced in terms of feedback. So there are currently 70 people on Facebook reviewing the updated draft. If you would like to be a part of that and you have opinions, please let me know, and we'll work together. We will collaborate and make something creative and change the world. Let's see, one more thing, and I can't think of it. It will come to me shortly, I'm sure. Okay, so good morning. Let's make sure we can do this. Nice. Good morning. My name is Malik Spencer. I am the author of a book titled Navigating Love. The book is about healthy choices and why we are systematically unable to make them. I call it the thin line between desire and dysfunction. I'll start by giving a little bit of information about myself. So I have an undergraduate and a graduate degree in computer engineering from the University of Cincinnati. I've worked as a microprocessor verification engineer at Compaq. I started a company with a friend of mine called Systematic Software, where we managed UC's virtual career fair for a number of years. From there, I went to an internet startup company called Planet Feedback, where I did business intelligence work. And my most recent job was at Children's Hospital, where I was a senior application developer, and I was lead architect on a clinical decision support system in charge or designed to support epilepsy, ADHD, mood disorder, and suicide. I'm currently on the board of No Theater, where we value community, collaboration, and play. I was previously on the board of Contemporary Dance Theater, and I've been on stage. There's the Stained Glass Theater is right around the corner from here. I was on stage there in a production of West Side Story, and I performed at the Airnoff in Ragtime. So that's kind of some background. My current passion is Latin dance, and I run a group. I'm lead instructor for a group called Reveal Your Love, where we look at the emotional side of dance. Classes start Sunday. So this picture here is actually a picture of myself and Audria Coleman teaching at Salsa on the Square. We were just talking about that. Okay. So since a book is a creative endeavor and I'm talking to a group of creative people, I thought, who better to talk to about the team behind the book than to this group? So the illustrator for the book, his name is Steve Meek. The lead editor, her name is Leah Silverman Gales. The associate editor, her name is Angela Bronzy. And the photographer in charge of capturing the front cover, her name is Kathy Markham. So as Jeremy was saying, this month's topic is sex. And probably like you, I was concerned about what is the connection between sex and creativity. So I took some time to come up with some connections. On one hand, we have collaboration, connection, love, and self-esteem. That's on one hand. But on the other hand, we have resentment, which is also a way that the two overlap. And that's what I'm going to focus on today is resentment, because to me, resentment is the most concrete. A couple of things I'll say about resentment. Resentment hurts creativity and sex. I just want to make sure we are very clear about the connection here. Resentment hurts creativity and sex. Resentment in your sex life can impact creativity at work. Navigating love is about preventing resentment. That's what the book is about. And my theory, my belief, is that if you can navigate love, then you will have the skills necessary to improve your sex life and improve your creativity. And we will have a talk about that if you would like at the end. Okay, so let's talk about what resentment actually looks like. From a sexual perspective, when we are resentful sexually, a couple of these things may be true for you. We derive pleasure from our mate's unhappiness. We exhibit less initiative. We give less than our best, and we feel justified in giving less than our best. We go through the motions, we perform poorly, express pessimism. You know, you're at work and going, oh man, this sucks, or whatever. And sometimes we outright sabotage each other. So there are opportunities for us to connect, and we don't exercise those options. So this was the book is about relationships, so it was relatively straightforward to come up with this list. Trying to come up with the list for a creative group was a little bit more complicated, so here's what I was able to come up with. Oh, look at that, they're exactly the same. So the one difference is sabotage at work might be withholding information or opportunities from your coworkers, that kind of thing. So far, so good? Okay, so let's talk about where resentment comes from in relationships. Part of my goal with the book was to create the most detailed explanation of where problems come from in relationships, with the idea that if we are clear about where the problems come from, we can solve them more effectively. So in my experience, relationships fall apart in 4 stages defined by the acronym ARID: attraction, rationalization, injury, and defensiveness. So let's start with attraction. We enter into relationships based on some form of attraction. You can be attracted to anything. I picked 6 things: character, intelligence, humor, physical beauty, money, and power. Attraction in and of itself is not a problem. It's when I become infatuated or obsessed with someone that I am not compatible with that things go haywire. So if I'm attracted to someone I'm not compatible with, I have to justify to myself why I would pursue that relationship. And those justifications I call rationalizations. There are an infinite number of ways we rationalize counterproductive behavior, or even productive behavior. But I picked 3. Rationalizations for dating someone I feel is out of my league. I might say to myself, you know what? I deserve a good mate. You seem like you would be a good mate, therefore I deserve you. That's one way. Another way is I might say to myself, she's here, I'm here, but she will make me stronger. So she will push me to eat more healthy. She will push me to reach my dreams. She will push me to balance my checkbook, all kinds of things. And slowly, we become equal. All of a sudden, it works out, doesn't it? Rationalizations for moving quickly. I might say to myself, you know, I'm not getting any younger, so I better find someone now. Or I might say to myself, I don't want to end up alone. And based on those 2 rationalizations, I can get into a relationship that's out of my league, or I might settle, that kind of thing. Rationalizations for outright deception. I might say to myself, you know, there's no such thing as an honest relationship, so trying to create one is a waste of time. That's the unicorn. Does it make sense? Mythical character. And then the other one is, I might say to myself, all men and women play games. I have to play games in order to defend myself. Armed with rationalizations, I can now move forward and pursue a relationship without feeling conflicted about it. The counterproductive things I do to get into that relationship, I call injuries. And those come in forms like lying, guilt tripping, secrets, ultimatums. Anything not in the long-term best interest of the relationship. Okay. And then at some point, those counterproductive things I do come to light. And when they come to light, we're going to have a talk about them. And when we have that talk, I'm going to defend myself. Now, the problem is that I'm defending my counterproductive behavior. So my defense is also counterproductive. Right? Okay, so everything on that last slide was theoretical until we get to injuries. That's when I actually do something. Like I said, what I didn't say, but I will say now, is that injuries come in two forms, conscious and subconscious. Conscious injuries are the counterproductive things I do that I know I'm doing. Those were the lying, guilt-tripping, secrets, ultimatums. We all know those things are bad, counterproductive, but we do them anyway. Many books talk about these counterproductive things, these conscious injuries. No book that I've come across, and I've read 120 books, talk about subconscious injuries, the counterproductive things we do that we don't realize we're doing. Counterproductive things fall into two camps, best foot forward and good intentions. No one talks about them because on the surface, these things seem very positive. The problem is when I continuously put my best foot forward and you don't see the full me. And so I end up misrepresenting myself. So that's the problem with subconscious injuries. Now, what happens here is that when I'm misrepresenting myself and putting my best foot forward, it's like I'm putting myself in a box. And at some point, most likely once I'm already in the relationship, I say, you know what, it's very uncomfortable to be in this box. I can't stay in here anymore. Surprise! And you see the real me. So that's the Jack in the Box here. And what happens is your mate will feel, wow, a bait and switch just occurred. You didn't say that up front. Why, what's going on here? And expectations are broken. That's what this is about. So this is one of the few illustrated relationship books I've ever come across, just to let you know. Okay, so we've talked about some of the problems. Let's talk about one solution. The first solution is clarity. Does anyone know what this is? This picture represents? No? Tower of Babel. So in the book, what I say is that no matter what you believe, there are friends, movies, music, family that passionately support your belief, a modern day Tower of Babel. It's very hard to actually change your behavior when you have so much support for what you are doing. Sometimes we even shop around for friends that agree with us, that kind of thing. So one way that we can achieve some clarity is by being clear about the terminology we use. And so I'm going to introduce 4 terms here. The first one is conflict. Conflict is the gap between what you expect and reality. As long as you are getting what you expect, you don't have a problem. It's when you don't get what you expect that things go haywire. Okay, that's the first one. Resentment is negative, my definition, negative energy focused on people over things. Me and my girlfriend, me and my mate, we can argue, and that's okay, as long as we argue about issues. When I become angry at my mate and I feel like my mate is the problem, that's when I call it resentment, and that's when it's hard to resolve. Okay. Deal breaker, anything that causes resentment. Now, for many people, this definition will be counterintuitive because oftentimes a deal breaker is the very last thing. It's the last straw before we leave a relationship. The problem with that definition is that by the time we come to that conclusion, the relationship is over. So we really would like an early warning system so that we can do something about it. So to me, anything that causes resentment is the start of a problem. Also, the reason I think of it this way is because oftentimes the thing that is a deal breaker is just one resentment in a stream of resentments. And oftentimes the last one is usually pretty small because our tolerance is shrinking. So not only is it arbitrary, it's probably the least important thing of all the things that break us up. So instead of picking that one, why not pick an earlier one? Preferably the first one, so we can address it early. Okay, last one. Love. So this is the least romantic definition of love I've ever seen, but I think it's the most accurate. A low tolerance for resentment. So what this means is that if I love myself, I will not want to punish myself. I will not want to subject myself to resentment. And if I love you, I will not knowingly subject you to resentment. That kind of thing. Okay. I can't wait for us all to talk about that at the end. Okay, so if you are on, so we talked about the Tower of Babel. Let's see the Tower of Babel in action. If you are on Facebook for any amount of time, then you've probably seen these little quotes and truisms in graphical form. I collect them because this is the kind of, this is what we're sharing with each other. This is how ideas spread through these kind of things. So what these first two I totally disagree with. So let's talk about those first. The first one says, the only guy that deserves you is the one who thinks he doesn't. And based on this framework I introduced earlier, it's this kind of thinking that gets us in trouble. I want a mate who sees me as an equal, not as a I'm lucky to be with you kind of thing. And so that's a problem, in my opinion. The next one is no expectations, no disappointments. This is very common. And there's some truth to it, but I think we misuse this quote, and that is where the trouble comes from. So my idea is that we have expectations. Remember, conflict is the gap between what we expect and reality. What happens is it's not the expectation as much as the fact that we don't state the expectation up front that, in my opinion, creates the problem. Okay, so this one is from the Bible, and I don't disagree with it, but again, I feel like people can misuse quotes to do more harm than good. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. So a person going through a potential breakup might use this quote to say, hey, don't give up on us. We should stay together. And if the relationship can be worked out, that's okay. But if you are not compatible, then the best thing you can do is probably to part ways. And so that's how this can be misused. In this last one, I added these little hash marks, but I don't really know what to make of this, but this is floating around on the internet, so I thought I would share it. I'll read it to you. Be a wolf, be a lion, take no crap, set goals, smash them, eat people's faces off, be a better person, show people who you are, never apologize for being awesome, and stay the course. Obviously, I left a few words out there. So, like I said, I don't really know what to make of this. It's motivational on one hand, but what is it motivating us to do? To eat people's faces off. That's what it's motivating us to do. Yeah, exactly. There's a time and place for everything. So translate that into a creative setting, and I'm sure you'll figure out what to do with that. Okay, let's talk about resentment in theory and in practice. So what I thought, we're a creative group. I'm going to use this floor plan to convey an idea. So the first is we enter in theory, we enter into relationships based on some form of attraction, like we talked about earlier. When conflict occurs, we envision using honest dialogue to respectfully and honestly air our differences. If we're unable to reach a compromise or an agreement, parting ways is always an option. Therefore, resentment should never exist, because the minute we feel resentment, we should just part ways. Now, if you've been in a relationship, you know this is not how it works. So let's talk about how it really works. Okay, in practice or in reality, few conflicts are actually big enough to withstand counter-arguments, such as, don't you trust me? Your expectations are the issue. Is it really that big of a deal? Nobody's perfect. Seriously? So these are the kind of things that we say to each other, and we try to be accommodating, and so we allow these things to go on for a short period of time until we can't take it anymore. And at that point, we explode and basically break out of the relationship. So in my opinion, what happens is we break out of relationships more than we break up. Notice that I removed the door. So it's kind of like a Hotel California kind of thing. It's kind of like, you're in now, surprise, and then resentment, I'm out of here, that kind of thing. Okay. The solution is love. Embrace the idea of walking away from counterproductive relationships. If you can work it out, work it out. But if the relationship is not productive, then maybe it's best that you part ways. So the idea here is that you can defend your position. I'm not happy with statements like, if you've talked about it up front, we've talked about this up front, we want different things, and that's perfectly okay. You deserve someone who loves you the way you are. Oftentimes, these last two options are not available to us because we're so busy trying to make the other person the bad guy or the bad woman that these are too nice. These are too simple to use. So we want powerful, hurtful things to say sometimes. And so, but if you feel this way about love, where you don't want to cause someone to feel resentment and you don't want to feel resentment, these two options would be perfectly fine for you. Also, this changes the whole dynamic. In the last slide, what I think typically happens is that we get into relationships, then surprise, you get the real me. And then we basically argue to get our way because we don't want to leave. We don't want to look petty. All these things that make us stay. Here, the idea is if I'm not happy, if you're not happy, then parting ways is an option. So there's always an exit. On one hand, that seems, it seems rough, but to me, this changes things because if we're together, our focus should be on maintaining the desire. So we're only here because we are attracted to each other and we want to be together. There's no other reason, that kind of thing. Okay, next. So the reality is that that's all well and good. It's all very theoretical. And most likely you will not do any of it because we are often in positions where we can't exercise our ability to walk away. So what I did is for the work setting, I decided to come up with a list of ways that you can empower yourself. Now, this is not a statement about leaving your employer. This is a statement about standing up for what you believe in. If there's a creative decision, but you're living paycheck to paycheck, you might not have the fortitude, the emotional stamina to push back. So these kind of things not only help you, but they help your employer. They help your client because you can make the decisions that you truly believe. Okay, so a couple of things. First one is, like I said, living check to check is terrible for resolve. So if you can have 6 to 12 months worth of income saved, you might be a little bit more confident. The next one, low debt, cost of living, same kind of thing. Passion for your craft. If you are passionate about what you do, then most likely you're aware of new technology, you're in the loop on creative new ideas, that kind of thing. A valuable skill set makes you mobile. A strong portfolio makes you mobile. Strong networks make you mobile. Diverse networks, if you have, for example, Latin dance or meetup groups, then you might be a big fish in a small pond. You get out into other places where they might not have access to creatives, that kind of thing. So I wanted to give an example of resentment in my own personal life. Not resentment, but injury in my own personal life. So when I was in college, I dated a woman, and I wanted to show her that I was a gentleman. And I was going to do that by taking her out to dinner. And what I did was, I only had $20 on me. So, being creative, I came up with the idea that we'll go out to dinner, I'll let her order first, I'll calculate how much money is left, and I'll order based on that. So she orders, and I'm like, okay, that's $5, that's $3, whatever. And I order based on what's left. As the waiter is walking away, she says, oh, by the way, I'll have a salad. And I was mortified because at that point my calculations were off and I was envisioning this is not going to be good. I will be so embarrassed by the time the check comes. So she's sitting there, she's having a wonderful time. Hey, talking, I'm like stone-faced. It probably was attractive because I was so stone-faced, like, no, this is gonna be embarrassing. Yeah, this is great. Luckily, my calculations were wrong and it worked out. But imagine how much better it would have been if I were honest up front. She might have said, I totally understand. I have money, she might have said. She might have collaborated with me. She might have adjusted her order knowing that, hey, Malik might want to order something too, that kind of thing. So honesty is the best policy. Also, the other thing is that if the money were an issue, it wasn't, but if it had been, it would have been better to know up front instead of dragging it out. But I was so busy trying to put my best foot forward that my mind was clouded. I wasn't thinking clearly. Okay, so I've been showing you these icons. The icons actually are the illustrations by Steve Meek. And what we did was we turned the icons are symbols that represent concepts in the book. And I turned them into a map. What we've covered are the shaded areas. The areas in red are the problems we've discussed, and we've discussed about half the problems in the book. And the area in green represents the solutions, and we've covered about a quarter of the solutions in the book. In summary, so we misrepresent ourselves to get, oftentimes, not always, we often misrepresent ourselves to get into relationships. Attractive mates, high-profile clients, lucrative projects. In the process, we create unrealistic expectations. At some point, those unrealistic expectations come to light and we fail to live up to them. When we fail to live up to them, that can trigger resentment. The resentment can, in the case of creativity and sex, can destroy creativity and sex. So I have two recommendations. When there's conflict, look for the gap. The idea is that, remember, conflict is the gap between what you expect and reality. If we, oftentimes when we get into conflict, what we talk about is the emotion. So I'm so pissed that you, blah, 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 came in at 4 a.m., for example. But instead, the real problem is you came in at 4 a.m. and I expected you to come in earlier. By thinking about it in terms of conflict, the conversation is you've already created the conversation. Instead of trying to figure out how to translate the emotion into words, you think about it in terms of the talk that you will give. That's the first one. The second one, which we didn't cover too much today, is reward communication to uncover the seeds of conflict. So oftentimes, so there are books like Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. I have the total opposite opinion. Sweat the small stuff, because it's usually the small stuff that grows into something that becomes big. We often don't say anything about the small things because we don't want to look petty. Is it really that big of a deal? Seriously? That kind of thing. If you encourage your mate to say things early, then you have a shot at addressing those issues. By the time it's big, oftentimes we translate our small issues into something that doesn't sound petty so that we can say it. Those issues are very hard to resolve when we do it that way. So reward your mate for saying you left the cap off the milk instead of saying that's so petty, because then they'll turn it into something else and things will go haywire. With that, I would like to say thank you very much. Please, if you have any feedback, if you want to be a part of the next version of the book and get your name in the book, please let me know. Thank you very much. Any questions? Not a single question. Really? Okay.
So you were working in IT and doing computer nerdy stuff before. What inspired you to write a book about love?
So the background of the book. So 14 years ago, I fell in love with this beautiful woman, tall, long hair, went to MIT, beautiful, wonderful person. And when I would, and I felt lucky to be in that relationship. So when I would hang out with friends, I would basically, parade her around and say, hey, how are you doing? This is my girlfriend. And I would look, waiting for the hand, high five, that kind of thing. And that pissed her off to no end. At that point, so we parted ways, and I called that my quarter-life crisis, because I was 25 at the time. So anyway, so the idea was I didn't want that to happen again. I started researching. And she introduced me to salsa dancing, and I was coming across all of these wonderful people, and that just became my thing. So I love computers. I still love them, but it was wonderful to have something outside of computers and a way to connect with people. And so I just focused on that. And I would get into relationships. We would misunderstand each other. I read all the books, but the problem was that I read all the books. So I had all the information. And basically, it turned out that if your mate doesn't have that same information, that's trouble waiting to happen. And so I was always teaching, and that caused issues and whatever. So I wanted to make things better, create something simple that would get us on the same page. That's what led to the book. Thank you. Any other questions?
Are you in a relationship now?
I'm dating now, but not in one right now. I thought I will, I don't want to turn my next relationship into a case study for the book, so let me get all the ideas out first, and then I'll seriously pursue one. That's a good question. Yes?
Has the person you're dating, have they read the book?
Say that again?
The person that you're currently dating, have they read the book? They know the expectations already?
Yes, yes. I mean, so that part, as a matter of fact, you're right. No. I think the concept of expectations is what's most important. We want to not express expectations because not sharing your expectations makes you look flexible. Hey, whatever, you want to stay out late all night? That's fine by me. Until we're in a relationship, then we start sharing what our expectations are. And so my thing is share some of your expectations. You won't know everything. Some things you just will not know up front. Share what you know, and don't scare your partner off by unloading 1,000 expectations on day one. But slowly, as it's appropriate, share your expectations. And if there's a problem, that's perfectly fine. It's good that we know now instead of dragging it out, that kind of thing. Make sense? Yes?
Do you think that there's a danger of sort of encouraging people to be really inflexible when you tell them, set these expectations and then draw this hard line in the sand? Because even like in the context of a creative work environment, I can think of times when like you kind of overpromise, but then you have to deliver, and so you do it, and you're impressed with yourself, or you're like, what, it is cool that you left the milk out on the counter.
Right. So this is a good point, which I didn't really articulate here. But the idea is that when there's a gap, the gap is academic until it causes you to feel resentment or act weird. So as long as I can deal with that gap constructively, everything is fine. But if leaving the cap off the milk pisses me off and I start screaming, then it's a real problem. So if you're in a work situation where you're against a hard deadline and it doesn't make you hate who you're working for, then it's like it's not a deal breaker. It's that gap, like I said, is more academic than anything. So it's more about knowing what gaps matter to you. And then you can come to that conclusion for yourself. Yes?
So when you talk about that gap, it reminds me a little bit of like two things, like attachment and a little bit of forgiveness. Where do those things play a role in the way this plays out?
So I would say that, as I was saying before, when we get into arguments, oftentimes our goal, I didn't say, but when we get into arguments, oftentimes our goal is to try to get our mate to do what we want them to do. In this model, the idea is different. What we're trying to do is say, let's just understand how we differ, and is this difference big enough? Can we come up with a peaceful compromise or an agreement? To me, forgiveness is built into the situation. You're a wonderful person. I don't have to take anything away from you. You are a wonderful person the way you are. You deserve someone who loves you the way you are. You should not have to change, that kind of thing. To me, that's the forgiveness piece. But if I'm going to act weird because the cap is off the milk or whatever, then I can forgive the person without being in a relationship with them. Does that answer?
When you say it's like, what I hear you saying is change with me, but not for me. Like we might change together as we build these compromises.
That's
change because that's the ultimatum.
That's true. Let me think about that. So, the way I look at it, because oftentimes when people change for each other, then they feel resentful because of that. So my perspective is, if I can encourage you to do something you've always wanted to do, you wanted to be healthier, And if I can be the encouragement that leads you to do that, then more power to both of us. But yeah, like you said, do not change for me, that kind of thing. Change with me, I like that. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
I think it's more of a statement, but I think it's a statement that means, it's sort of asking, is this what you're saying?
Okay.
But it's essentially like, you don't have to put the cap on the mill, but if you don't get to ask me why I look in the way, because you know I don't see you look the cap on the mill.
That's kind of what I'm saying. So I would take it even a step further. Let's use a more substantial example, just for this particular quote. So if healthy eating is important to me, and my mate is not big on healthy eating, or physical fitness is important to me, but physical fitness is not as important to her, then to kind of parallel what you were saying, this is what I would prefer, or this is what I prefer, and this is what I'm seeing. You're perfectly fine to do what you're doing, but I'm looking for someone who does this. And I'm not saying you need to be that person. I'm just saying this is what I'm looking for. You're fine the way you are. Stay that way, but this is what I'm looking for. Does that answer your question? Now, like I said, this is hard because this requires fortitude to really stand up for what you believe, that kind of thing. Okay? Yes.
Second question, we're always talking about leaving the cap off the milk. What if leaving the cap off the milk is corporate policy? Or corporate policy is something that we perceive as someone leaving the cap off the milk. It's not going to change its policy. This is what we do. I mean, is that resentment then, is that reason enough in our resentful stage to be resentful?
So that's a good question. Maybe the first thing I will say is, if you will act weird because of this corporate policy, if you will be resentful and do less than your best work because of your resentment, then it's probably best for you to be in an environment that supports what you believe. Your resentment will cause you to perform poorly, be pessimistic, kill the morale of your whole team, not push back on bad ideas. So to me, if you feel that way, that resentment is real. So that's the first thing. And maybe I'll just leave it at that I agree. Or I believe that your resentment is powerful and we should respect it. Yes?
Can you talk about even getting into a relationship and as a whole person and not going into a relationship trying to fulfill something in your life? And like whether it's even good to be into a relationship at all at some point in your life?
That's actually a good question. Thank goodness I have this slide right here. So I was like, that's an excellent question. So the book actually, I don't cover the search for a mate, and I don't talk about how we recover from a breakup. It's more like you have the skill to find someone, you get into a relationship, and it kind of takes over from, the book picks up from there. Since I haven't really thought about it too much as formally as I've thought about everything else, catch me on Facebook, I will think about it, and I will get back to you. That's actually a good question. Okay, any other questions? Yes?
In relationships, there's all kinds of people that you come across that you're attracted to, but there's some that are just crazy.
Crazy, I like that.
You have to decide in life how much craziness you can handle and how much you can't.
Mhm.
And sometimes I think that craziness on your side or their side, which can happen either way, is sometimes based on your relationship with your own family and your own parents.
That's,
So two-part question is, what do you think about that? And then also, what's your relationship like with your mom?
okay, so I'll answer the last one first because that one's easy. So I love my mom, and hi mom, and she rocks, and just like everyone else's mom, we all think our moms are the best mom in the world. So I'll answer that one first. I agree that our past can influence our present and future, and I would say that the nice thing about expressing conflict is the gap between what you expect and reality is you get a couple of benefits. One is your expectation is made clear. The next thing is that you have to take ownership of your expectation, and you can start a dialogue about the reality. Maybe you say something like, man, you were out till 4 in the morning, but in fact it was only 2, and you misunderstood. When you state what you think the reality is, you can have a conversation about it. In the context of our past, by stating what we expect, that opens us up to a conversation about how did you come to that expectation. And I think that's a very powerful thing. But at the end of the day, even if it's because of your upbringing, your family history, that that there's a little bit of craziness in your life, if you're going to act weird, if you're going to be resentful because of that gap, then at the end of the day, it might be better to find someone who's crazy in the same way you are, that kind of thing.
So find out about crazy as soon as you can.
Exactly, uncover crazy as soon as you can. I like that. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
So, if you're okay, we're just not meeting each other's expectations. Is it truly then? It's not you, it's me.
Basically, okay. Let me think about this. That's actually a good question. So I would say, at the end of the day, it really is me. So it might be. You hear the quote, it's not you, it's me, I don't like you. It might be that kind of thing. It's kind of like, well, at the end of the day, it's still me. It's my expectations that I need to satisfy. And the nice thing about that is that when you make it about you, it's a problem you can solve. You can't solve your mate's problems. You can only solve yours. Any other questions? Yes.
So basically what you're saying, like it all kind of boils down to be who you really are, just like show like your true face, and then hopefully in that situation you're gonna, whether it's a client or somebody that you're dating or whatever, that you hope that they would do the same and decide whether or not you can accept them as they are, and if you can't, then hey, it's okay, you're who you are, I'm who I am, and that's great. And
True, and that's effectively what the book is about. I come at it from a slightly different angle because there are 20,000 relationship books on Amazon. So, and they all basically roughly say the same thing: be yourself. What I come at it from a slightly different angle, where it is, we are not being ourselves, and why is that? And let's figure out how we can address that, because when we address that and we can be ourselves, then everything else kind of falls into place. Everything else becomes simpler.
so follow up, so you said you were in that like relationship, didn't go well, and then you started reading all these books and you started realizing these concepts. I'm sure you started realizing them and developing them in your head well before you put them into the book, but as you went through that, you were still dating, and then you said like, okay, so you realized you knew these things, but the person you were with didn't necessarily know them. So how do you navigate kind of having that knowledge is like, oh, this is really how it should be? How do you navigate that with somebody that just, out of their own inexperience or whatever doesn't have that? How do you navigate that?
That's a good question. So the what we talked about earlier was the idea of the Tower of Babel. No matter what you believe, there are people, books, articles, friends, family, who support your belief. So that's kind of what happens. For a person who's, it's not really I don't want to use the word experience because it kind of makes me look like, oh yeah, I'm experienced. It's more for people who have a different understanding.
Right.
Yeah, I'll say that.
I wanted to say the word ignorance, but that didn't sound very good.
Yeah, that's not
know that, hey, it can be this way.
right. So what I tried to do in the book, what I think we've done in the book, is that I call out those conflicts in our beliefs. If you believe this, then why do you do this? And I do this over and over throughout the book. So, or I call out things, there's a part of the book called relationship chess, and the relationship chess corresponds to all of the counterproductive things we do to win arguments. There are all these in relationships, there are all of these perverse incentives. So there's no arbitrator of truth. So the next best thing we can do is try to win the arguments that we get into, and that creates this perverse incentive. So what I describe in the book is hey, you're winning your arguments, because I was very good at winning these arguments, but I was destroying my mate in the process. She was just like, I don't even care anymore. And then I wouldn't be attracted to her because she didn't have all the energy she had at the beginning. So what I do is call out those things. You won your argument, but are you creating resentment in the process? Are you doing this? You do this, but do you do it for this reason? And see how that impacts this other thing? And the book is full of these places where I look for contradictions. And so does that answer your question? Let me ask another one. I'm happy to answer. Okay. Any other questions?
I feel like this is all, a lot of it's really focused on from a kind of dating relationship phase. Does any of this change within the context of a marriage, or say a dream job, right, in the actual workplace environment? So you have a job that you really love, or you end up marrying somebody, and at that point you're in this commitment that you really want to make work, and you want to have a lifetime kind of your dream job for the rest of your life kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Does this change any, or how does this apply in that context?
Okay, so the first thing about marriage, since I've never been married, I can't comment on that too deeply. Now I have friends who are married, and what I perceive is that it's very similar, but I've never been married, so I don't know. So just take that with a grain of salt. As far as dream job, as far as marriage, to me, the way you make it persist is by preventing resentment. So it's when you get put into a bind and you're forced to do something you don't want to do, and you feel a little bit of resentment, and you start acting a little weird, and then that impacts your coworkers and so on and so forth. Or because you feel resentment, you're sabotaging your employer some kind of way, or your team in some kind of way. And so to me, if we can prevent resentment, which is what the book is about, then that's how we make it last. As long as I'm happy, then why would I not do my best work? If you come up with a reason, please contact me on Facebook so we can talk about it, but that kind of thing.
So building off his comment, I was looking at your map with you had exits all over, you know?
Okay.
And you had said it's important to have exits, and I think that's true if you're dating, but when you get married, you actively close those exits. You know?
Right.
And so
Well, is that true? I mean, because with the divorce rate being so high, those exits really...
That's breaking out, right?
That's breaking out, exactly.
So I guess I'm saying, like, if you have resentments in a marriage, which is inevitable, you can turn it around, I would believe, right?
You can. I mean, I think another idea is that when you see the gap doesn't immediately become resentment. It's if you don't address it, then it becomes resentment. At that point, there's an opportunity for some intervention. That might be the time for a relationship coach or a marriage counselor, that kind of thing. But if you don't have the skill to eliminate that resentment and you allow it to persist, then at some point that breaking out process will happen. So I agree that people reverse resentments all the time, but you have to work on that. There's some skill that needs to be built there. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, okay. Let's get some hard questions.
Related to that, I've been married 23 years, wonderful relationship, and if I look back at any of those times during that marriage where we had conflict, it was usually because of resentment, like you're talking about.
Okay.
But I can tell you that a lot of things you're saying are as accurate for starting a relationship as it is throughout.
Really? Okay. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Okay. Any hard questions? Let's get some hard questions going. This is how the book gets better. So I'm like, I want to hear them. Let's get them. No other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. Happy navigating.